مرحبا، معكم الكاتبة رشا بركات، معدة ومقدمة برنامج صالون رشا عبر بودكاست حركة الشبيبة اليافية. صالون رشا رح يكون صالون مفتوح لكل أنواع العناوين المحلية والعالمية واللي أكيد بتفيدنا. اسمعونا على منصات التواصل الاجتماعي والتطبيقات سبوتيفاي، بودبين، جوجل وأبل، وطبعا على الفيسبوك بصفحتي بودكاست حركة الشبيبة اليافية وحركة الشبيبة اليافية. صالون رشا. أهلا وسهلا بكم أعزائي في صالون رشا وعبر أثير بودكاست حركة الشبيبة اليافية. طبعا نحن برامجنا جميعها هادفة، وكذلك يعني كما عودتكم في صالوني أن يكون هناك حلقات بلغات مختلفة أيضا، ليس فقط في اللغة العربية، الأغلبية هي في اللغة العربية لأننا نحب أن نكرس لغتنا العربية وهويتنا وغيره، وكذلك هناك بعض الحلقات في اللغة الأجنبية مثل الإنكليزية والفرنسية حتى الآن. أما اليوم فقد اخترت لكم أعزائي نبذة من كتاب باللغة الإنجليزية، وكي تكون حلقتي أيضا موجهة لأهلنا في الشتات ولكل الأجانب الذين لا يعرفون اللغة أن يتكلموا اللغة العربية أو يفهموها. هذا الكتاب اسمه Once Upon a Homeland من كتابة ليلى هنيدي. لاحقا سأحاول أن أترجم ما قلته الآن في للغة الإنجليزية، وسأقرأ نبذة من مقالة أو من فصل في هذا الكتاب، وهو يعني تحت اسم أو عنوان The Meaning of Occupation، معنى الاحتلال. فلقد لفتتني هذه النبذة أو هذه الفقرة وهذا العنوان في كتابها الشيق للزميلة والأخت ليلى هنيدي الكاتبة أقصد، وسأعرف عنها بتعريف بسيط. هذا الكتاب صادر عن دورنس Publishing Co. وأما بالنسبة للأستاذة ليلى هنيدي فهي معها دكتوراه بالبابليك أفيرز، يعني الشؤون العامة، وكذلك والسياسة، وفي يعني الاختصاص السياسي and policy من Hatfield School of Government at Portland State University. وهي كذلك يعني لديها يعني خبرة بالسياسة في الميدل إيست أو في الشرق الأوسط، سياسة الشرق الأوسط، الاجتماع الاقتصادي أو التنمية الاقتصادية الاجتماعية. فلديها يعني هذا الكتاب برأيي مهم أيضا للتطرق حوله وللحديث عنه، وأنا اخترت لكم فصل بعنوان معنى الاحتلال. How are you? Hello, listeners from all over the world, listeners of Yafayouth podcast programs. And today in my program, Salon Russia, I will talk about a book, a very interesting book called Once Upon a Homeland by the author Leila Huneidi. Author Leila Huneidi earned her PhD in Public Affairs and Policy from Hatfield School of Government at Portland State University, and has extensive experience in Middle Eastern political and socio-economic development. Her research has focused on interdisciplinary theories explaining the contemporary status of the conflict in Palestine and how it has resulted in the longest existing occupation in recent history. Her doctoral dissertation, downloaded by thousands around the world, is a published case study on democratic governments and development under authoritarian regimes. Dr. Huneidi lives in Portland, Oregon, and has traveled extensively throughout the Middle East. In addition to her research and writing, she tutors students of all ages and levels in social studies and Arabic language. Dear listeners from all over the world, I will read the paragraph in the book called Once Upon a Homeland, as I have mentioned before, which is published by Dorrance Publishing Co. and written by Layla Huneidi. The paragraph is titled under the meaning of occupation. It says, according to the Merriam-Webster's Collegiate Dictionary and Webster's New American Dictionary, the initial definitions of the noun occupation and the verb to occupy are defined with regards to the workplace as in a job, place, time, or any space that becomes filled, busy, engaged, or inhabited by someone or something. While in a supplementary interpretation, another association is made to mean with the possession, use, or settlement of land. The act or process of taking possession of a place, area, or country are synonyms of colonialism, which means a control by one power over a dependent area or people. While other interpretations for the verb to colonize focus on several positive synonyms such as establish, reconstruct, or build a colony. Similarly, the colony in most dictionaries is interpreted as a body of people living in a new territory, or a group of people with common interests situated in close association, which can be interpreted as a positive and peaceful entity. Western colonialism emerged as a practice of policy among European countries in 1488. In its general meaning, colonialism is the external invasion of weaker nations or smaller states by the Western colonial states of greater powers and stronger armies in pursuit of economic interests. The rivalry among the colonial powers had increased since WWI, inciting European powers to expand their territory through invasions in order to increase their political gains. Following WW2 means the World War II, the Second World War, a new world order necessitated a new form of hegemony and power as the fight to eradicate colonialism pit imperialistic nations against a growing Third World War revolutionary front, buttressed by the Soviet Union. With the evolution of the field of international relations helping to reshape public opinion and educate communities on the plight of people living under colonial rule, colonial powers were forced to reconsider their imperialistic objectives and weigh each theater's importance with respect to their overall agenda. The author Layla Huneidi continues her discussion in this part saying, the colonial powers fortified their existence by building settlements on colonized lands, terrorizing and assaulting the colonized inhabitants, dividing them by highlighting their disagreements to create rival factions, discriminating amongst populations of the same religions, to implant seeds of sectarianism, empowering ignorance and poverty, to emphasize retardation and underdevelopment. The list of the oppressive and divisive colonial practices goes on. In order to maintain their rule and ensure its longevity, occupying countries employed excessive military power against the indigenous populations of the colonized states. The Arab states that were colonized by European countries are still reeling from the aftermath of the colonial era that tore through the fabric of their societies and weakened their states, governing systems, and institutions, causing the former colonies to suffer for decades after their liberation. For example, the Arab countries of North Africa that had been under French rule struggled to reinstate their Arabic language, which had been overridden by the French language. Efforts to endorse the original language, beliefs, values, and national identity and put them back into the educational systems and societies in these states are ongoing. Furthermore, the sectarianism implanted and encouraged by colonial powers led to civil wars within former colonies. Many of these conflicts are ongoing, as the colonial powers did not only embed sectarianism in their constitutions, but also continue to feed it from abroad long after their rule was over. Colonialism is considered a phenomenon of conquest that reached its peak in the 18th century and ended in the 20th century. Yet, it is clear that official end of colonial rule did not end its consequences, as the Arab region still suffers deeply in its aftermath. Occupation can be defined as a military invasion that takes place for achieving particular strategic gains. It usually occurs over a short period of time. Thus, according to common definitions of the term, occupation ends shortly after the conqueror achieves its goal, such as to force the other government to concede or acknowledge a certain treaty. The examples most commonly associated with the term are Germany's occupation of a northern province in France from 1871 to 1873, and France's occupation after the First World War of the German region of Bochum. In both cases, the occupying power ended its siege after the two players signed concessions between them. Here, colonialization does not apply, only a temporary occupation. Not all occupations can be considered as colonial tactics. Occupation, however, is a primary tool of colonialism. Palestine is currently living under a long-term occupation that has continued for more than 73 years. This indicates that colonialism and occupation are not phenomena of the past, as often theorized by scholars in an attempt to vindicate the occupying entity in Palestine, though the practices and policies enacted in Palestine are in accordance with the definition of colonialism and with the practices and policies of the previous colonial powers. The author continued by saying, the brutality and crimes of the occupying authority against civilians of inside Palestinians can no longer be accepted. Their narrative can no longer be believed, because we are living in a time of connectedness and the instant transmission of information. The inhumane practices of this occupying entity are constantly being revealed, and its continued oppression and occupation confirm this entity's violations of the Palestinians' freedoms and human rights, a situation that cannot remain ignored by Western theorists, analysts, and politicians. However, she continued also by saying, I presume that the situation that took place in Palestine was not classified as a colonial situation due to the incorporation of the global law of human rights by the United Nations in 1945, a law whose effect remained confined in the national policies of the previous colonial countries but did not affect their foreign policies. This can be seen in their internal responses to the various transformations of that time, such as industrialization, the changing roles of nation states, the chronological evolution of human rights that focused on liberation from authoritarian and coercive rules, and the corresponding of human rights to their citizens, while their foreign policies, practices, and violations of human rights remained irreconcilable. Dear listeners, this was the part I have chosen and decided to read it for you in the book called Once Upon a Homeland by the author Layla Huneidi. Thank you all, and I hope that you listen to all our programs in Yafayouth podcast, and you can listen to them as I have mentioned in the promo. Bye bye. Salon Rasha.